We on Five Sports Podcast, the spot. Season number 4, episode number 21. Man, I hope you guys had a great weekend, man. I hope you guys enjoyed what was going on across the sporting landscape. We had the NFL playoffs in the divisional round jump off, and boy, was it exciting matchups across the NFL. Know you guys were stoked up about that. Obviously, some teams that 1, 2, 3 Cancun. Looks like the season is over for a handful of teams. We're definitely going to get into that as we come up. But first and foremost, my Chicago Bears made a new hire, bringing in Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator, formerly of the Detroit Lions, as the Detroit Lions head fell on the guillotine this weekend against the Washington Commanders. Also, too, I got a special guest falling through. Salim, Mr. Taylor Street himself from the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast. He's going to be falling through as we get into the Bears hiring of Ben Johnson and all what that means for the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams moving forward. But, woo, boy, we had some hot games this weekend. And I'm going to start off with the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. This was a game that everybody has been salivating for since the matchup was put into place, as the Bills had the home game in this one, as the Ravens came into Buffalo to try to get them a W. And the Bills was able to win this game 27-25. And boy, was this a good football game. You had a situation in the first half where Lamar Jackson looked like he was going to wet the bed again. And there's been a lot of talk about Lamar Jackson over the last couple of years, pretty much as far as just him not being the same guy in the playoffs. And it looks like it was going to rear his ugly head in the first half of this football game with 2 turnovers in the first half, one a fumble and one an interception, as they was down 21-10 at the half. I knew that Baltimore was going to try to put their best foot forward in the second half of this football game, and you just had a couple snafus. One of them just simply being was with the Mark Andrews. With the fumble, and also too with Mark Andrews with the failed 2-point conversion. There's been a lot of people that has been giving Lamar Jackson and Andrews a lot of flack, but at the end of the day, as I mentioned before, you guys are a fan of the show. You already know how I get down. Turnovers in playoff games, they kill you every single time, and they have you being sent home every single time. And there's been a lot of talk about him playing well in the second half of the football game, but I just think that at the end of the day, it's a situation to where you can't go down by that much on the road. I mean, the chances of you coming back on the road is kind of slim to none, especially when you play good football teams, just in regards. Lamar was obviously frustrated, in the presser after the game. Just at the end of the day, you just can't make those mistakes, and that's been the theme of the teams that we've seen that have taken an L so far in the playoffs, is that the teams with the less turnovers is the teams that move on. And you saw it with Josh Allen. I mean, at the end of the day, he threw for under 200 yards, but he didn't have no picks and no turnovers. He was able to get them key first downs when it was needed. James Cook came through, made some plays. They was able to get the ball, a couple of possessions as far as, the receivers. And I just think that at the end of the day, this team, talking about Buffalo, I think it was a lot of question marks coming into the season with a bunch of guys that they lost on the offensive end, with Diggs, and you had Gabe Davis out of the building, and you just had a situation where Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, he had to kind of make it do what it do. And so for the Ravens, their season ends unceremoniously. I'm not going to say that Jackson came up small. I just think that at the end of the day, you can play some decent football and make a couple timely mistakes, and they can cost you a football game. And so we saw this, and at this point now, you got the Bills who's moving forward to the AFC Championship game. And, I'll get into the other situation with the Kansas City Chiefs coming up. But I just think that at the end of the day, the Ravens, they had every opportunity to win this game on the road, and at the end of the day, they wet the bed, and their season is ceremoniously over with. Then we had the situation with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams have had a long couple of weeks with the California wildfires. You know, they had to move on and play their game in Arizona last week, and then they moved on to go to Philadelphia, where the first half it was cold, and the second half it was a snow bowl. And just 2 words for the Philadelphia Eagles: Saquon Barkley. I mean, what a great game that this guy had. I mean, over 200 yards on the ground. I mean, just them long, just to the house type touchdowns. And I just think at the end of the day, the Rams, they fought as much as they can with Sean McVay. You know, he's Mr. Scheme Up. I think he's the best head coach in the NFC. And the Rams, they had a chance to win this football game. It came down to the last possession for them. You know, shout out to Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles, making big-time plays. And I think at the end of the day, it's really about those timely plays, especially when you talk about a defensive tackle, man, is that, you know, they don't get to the quarterback every single play, but it's just all about when they make those particular plays. And I think that Matt Stafford, he's not the most mobile quarterback in the NFL, and they brought it right up the gut with the pressure on him. And so the Rams, you know, Kyron Williams had a big, you know, fumble in this football game where the Rams was trying to gain momentum. I thought Philadelphia, once Barkley had that long touchdown run, I thought they let off the gas. And they almost got burnt as Matt Stafford brought them straight back downfield just for an opportunity to make a score at the end. But, you know, they fell up short on 4th down. And so now we got the table set. The Philadelphia Eagles, you know, and the Commanders a matchup. And I'll get into their game a little bit earlier. And obviously I'll get back into, you know, the Chiefs side of the AFC for the AFC Championship game. So it was definitely an exciting weekend, man. I just sat back and watched a lot of good football as it was cold across most parts of the United States. So I hope you guys was able to be warm and cozy as watching these particular matchups as well. Just on the NBA tip, because, you know, we don't want to keep it 100% football, even though football is the move right now with the playoffs being kicked off. You know, just in the NBA, man. And I just got a little shout out to Philadelphia. And I'm talking about the Philadelphia 76ers. It's time to blow it up, y'all. I think it's time to trade Joel Embiid. I mean, just Paul George and the signing of him getting the max has been a disaster. I just don't think that Paul George wanted no more. And I just think that, you know, at the end of the day, when you get, you know, as long as he's been in the league, you got to have that dog, man. And I just don't think that Paul has that dog anymore. You know, obviously a lot of people have been critical of him with, you know, with his podcast situation. And I do believe that take a little bit of oomph away from the players just in regards. And I think just at the end of the day for Philadelphia, they're going nowhere. They're going nowhere. This team is not going to make the playoffs. And you got Daryl Morey, who has been, you know, the Messiah for Houston as well as, you know, Philadelphia. But I think that at the end of the day for him, you know, we keep receipts here on We on 5 Sports Podcast, the spot. And Morey's never won an NBA championship. Also, too, with him and Sam Presti, as I mentioned on last episode. I think at the end of the day, at some point, man, you got to take your team to the promised land. You know, these guys, like I said, they've been, you know, analytical messiahs and so forth, and making trades and making moves and drafting and so forth. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to raise up a championship trophy for your respective organizations. They failed to do so, both of those gentlemen. So I do think it's time for the Philadelphia 76ers to go ahead and blow it up, man, and move forward. So as I mentioned, man, once again, man, I appreciate it. For your first time listening, you can check us out on YouTube at We on 5 Sports. Also, too, we on Twitter. Also, too, we across where all podcasts can be heard at. So I appreciate it for your first time listening. Welcome back. Welcome in. And if you're an OG of the show, definitely welcome back. You know how we get down, straight talk, no chaser around these parts. Coming up, I got my man E from the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast falling through. A little bit later, as we discuss the whole best situation with Ben Johnson being the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. First of all, thanks for listening. I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on 5 Sports Podcast. The spot. We're going to get into the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. I'm going to start off first with the Saturday slate. We had 2 teams coming into this game, both with first round byes. That's the Kansas City Chiefs and the Detroit Lions. And I'm going to start off on the AFC side as the Kansas City Chiefs took on the Houston Texans. And this was a game with Kansas City coming in. You know, they're chasing history, try to be a 3-time Super Bowl champion. That's never been done in the NFL. And the Chiefs being at home with this divisional matchup against the Texans coming in as the incumbent. And the Texans last week, they took care of business against the Chargers. They was able to knock them off with great defensive effort by the Houston Texans. They was able to make Justin Herbert look like a mere mortal, man, with 4 interceptions in that football game. And, you know, it's a step up. You know, he came into this football game a step up, taking on Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and the Swifties. And you can throw Caitlin Clark in there now. And it's always good to see playoff football, especially in a situation with Arrowhead. You know, it's going to be, you know, get your popcorn ready type of deal, especially with Patrick Mahomes. And the Texans, I thought they had a puncher's chance coming into this football game. I thought that C.J. Stroud, he finally got the wheels turning last week, especially when the Chargers was turning over the football. I thought that the defense played outstanding for the DeMeco Ryans, and I think that was the litmus test for them to move on into this divisional matchup against the champs. And the champs held serve, man. The Chiefs was able to win this football game 23-14. You know, this is a game that, you know, was close in the first half. And you usually see that, especially with young football teams or football clubs taking on more experienced teams. It's usually competitive through the first quarter or two in the football game. And the second half, you kind of see the OGs separate themselves. And that's what the Chiefs did. You know, there was a lot of talk, you know, about the play with Patrick Mahomes as far as the, you know, roughing penalties, 2 of them to be exact. And for me, you know, a lot of people think, hey, man, the Chiefs, they're getting the benefit of the whistle from the refs. And I believe so from a standpoint of it's the quarterback, man. And any quarterback, you know, they're going to err on the side of caution. They're going to throw that flag, man, when in doubt. You know, the play, especially when he was scrambling out of the pocket, you know, made a couple, I consider, crossover moves to get himself back reset. And then he went down like old school Peyton Manning used to do back in the day. And you had 2 Texas defenders, you know, try to pop them, man. That's their job at the end of the day. Funny enough, those 2 guys collided. You know, Patrick Mahomes got the light end of the impact, and the flag went out anyway. You know, I do think that was a momentum play in that football game. I also think that, you know, the play a little bit earlier in the first half, if I'm not mistaken, with the roughing penalty after he threw the ball. It was Will Anderson. You know, he was frustrated, you know, with the play overall. DeMeco Ryans was frustrated. And, you know, I just think that at the end of the day, listening to their comments, you know, in the post game, you know, they were frustrated from a standpoint of they believe it was them versus the refs. And usually when you kick in that signs, man, it's typically a situation of where you lost the football game. You had an opportunity to win the game. You know, with the Chiefs, you got to beat the Chiefs, especially at home. That's just tough sledding first and foremost. I mean, the only guy that was able to do that was Joe Burrow in recent memory. And Joe went out there on gunslinger mode. Didn't turn the ball over. Straight up outdued Patrick Mahomes. As, you know, the Bengals a couple years ago went to the Super Bowl. I just think that at the end of the day, the Chiefs, they the champs, and when you talk about the champs, you got to knock out the champ. You're not going to get a decision. You're not going to get a favorable call. You got to knock the champs out. You know, we seen good ball from Travis Kelce. You know, just, you know, first ballot Hall of Famer, and a lot of people, he's considered the greatest tight end of all time. I think, you know, he's in that conversation. It depends on, you know, what you look at in the tight end. You know, you got Gronkowski's out there. You got, you know, Unc or Shannon Sharp. He was an outstanding tight end, you know, with his tenure through the 90s with the Denver Broncos and also to the Baltimore Ravens. You know, you got, you know, Kellen Winslow. So there's a lot of good tight ends I've seen over the years of the National Football League, but I think that Travis Kelce, in my personal opinion, I think he is the best tight end I've ever seen. I think Gronk, for him, you know, just battling injuries in his tenure in New England, he was outstanding performer. Him and Tom Brady, you know, had a good playoff run and several Lombardi trophies for the New England Patriots. But, you know, I think that the Chiefs, at the end of the day, I predicted them to win this game coming in. As I mentioned, it's just tough sled, man, going into Kansas City and knocking off the Kansas City Chiefs in any kind of situation, you know, especially when, you know, in essence, bring down your turnovers. And I think that, you know, the second half of this football game was really where we saw, you know, a veteran football team that has been in a lot of slug matches, a lot of grudge matches over the years in the AFC with the Chiefs. They advanced to their 7th consecutive AFC championship game. Now, first and foremost, I've never seen that. I've never seen a team go to 7 consecutive AFC championship games or any championship game 7 years in a row. Is there one win away from getting to the Super Bowl again for the Chiefs? For the Texans, C.J. Stroud, I'm not going to say he had a bona fide sophomore slump, but he wasn't the same guy in the second season. A lot of that had to do with the Houston Texans offensive line. I mean, they just couldn't hold their weight. We saw the cracks during the regular season. They had some injuries. Tank Dell being out, for the season with the knee injury. You had Nico Collins out during the earlier part of the season. He was nicked up and out a little bit. And so I think at the end of the day, the Texans can hold their heads high because in the AFC it's a pecking order. And we all know it's the Chiefs, Bills, and the Ravens that run the AFC. I think the Texans is that new young team that's on the come up. And I think they'll have better days. I think, though, at the end of the day, them blaming the refs is just, what I call just, a young team mentality, man. At the end of the day, to beat the champ, you got to knock the champ out, man. You're not going to get a decision. You can forget about that as the Chiefs once again move on to the AFC championship game next week. And then on the other side in the NFC, we had the Detroit Lions. Detroit stand up. What up, though? Taking on the Washington Commanders. Detroit, they was at home last week with the bye. Detroit, playing a home game and just their fan base and just the passion that they brought out to Ford Field for this football game was electric, especially in the early part of the game to see. And they defense, man. And Aaron Glenn, he's a hot head coaching candidate, rightfully so. I remember Aaron Glenn, being a stout cornerback coming into the National Football League in the 1998 draft, was a top 5 pick by the New York Jets, a real good football player in his football days. He showed his worth as a coach. And it's just at the end of the day, the Lions, man, this team had 18 guys, man, that hit injury reserve during the regular season for them. It's just been a mass unit on the defensive end. And we knew that it was a ticking time bomb with this team. And it all boiled down to really the matchups. Because that's what the playoffs really is about. It's really about the matchups. And I thought that the Lions, from the defensive standpoint, they was behind the 8 ball. Because Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders, they own one. And we saw this in this football game. They could not stop the Commanders to stop their life. Whether it was on first, second, or third down, and also throw in the 4th down. They couldn't stop this football club. I think Jaden Daniels, he's a star. I think he played within his game. They was able to protect him in the pocket, as well as he didn't turn the football over. And that's the thing, man, about the playoffs is that any quarterback, if you don't turn the football over, you automatically give your team an opportunity to win the football game. And the Commanders was able to do that. I mean, they put up the big 4-5. The big 4-5 on the road. Outstanding football game for them. The Lions putting up 31 points. Most people would believe that was enough for them to win a home playoff football game, but they came up short. And yeah, I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Jared Goff. Jared Goff, just 4 turnovers. Just a fumble, and he didn't play his best football. And there's been a lot of people that, at the end of the day, believe that Jared Goff has hit his ceiling. And one thing I can say about the Detroit Lions, for most part of the season, they was a well-balanced football club. From the defensive end, also too from the offensive end, from the running game, Jared Goff being able to make plays. He was pretty consistent for most of the season outside of that 5 interception game or 5 turnover game he had, a couple months ago, and they still was able to win that football game. But in the playoffs, you turn the ball four times over, it's a wrap. It don't matter if you John Elway, don't matter if you Joe Montana, it don't matter if you Tom Brady. You turn the ball over 4 times, man, you're going home. And so for the Lions and Dan Campbell, an outstanding story. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, both their coordinators, the offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is the hottest name out here on the streets. And I just think that the defensive side with Aaron Glenn, his name was hot out here in the streets. I'm not sure if it take a little dimmer after this performance in this football game, but there's no excuses. At the end of the day, it's a win or go home in the NFL. This is not the NBA where it's a long, drawn-out 7-game series. You can easily get snaked at home. And this kind of reminds me of, we go back into the time machine just a little bit. Because I remember back in the day when the San Francisco 49ers in 1987, they was the best team in football. And I seen them, get into the divisional round after having a bye. And the Minnesota Vikings came in and straight DDT'd them back in those candlestick. Ended their season. There was a lot of acrimony after that season for the 49ers. Should they let Bill Walsh go, the head coach? And, was he over the hill as far as coaching? So I've seen this scenario play itself out before. Shout out to the Washington Commanders and Dan Quinn. They've had an outstanding season. They own one right now. They're definitely drinking the Kool-Aid and believing everything that the organization has to offer. They got a young budding superstar in Jaden Daniels as they mosey on to the NFC Championship game. For the Lions, man, it's going to be a long, long offseason for the Lions, especially, too, if they have that turnover from the offensive coordinator as well as the defensive coordinator. Dan Campbell's going to have to bring in a whole new regime on both sides of the football in that regard. So you never know in the NFL. That window is a very small window. And they were on a redemption tour coming into this season. Lost in the NFC Championship game last year to the San Francisco 49ers, a game they could have easily won. And I thought they was on their way to get themselves to the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history. They fell short there. You come back in this season, you earn the bye. You put the work in, but one bad defensive effort and a bunch of turnovers from your quarterback, franchise quarterback of your organization, got you sitting home like everybody else, man, watching next week. So that's my look across the first slate of the NFL playoffs in the divisional round. And coming up, I'm going to break down the rest of the divisional matchups as we gear towards the AFC and NFC championship game. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. And we got breaking news, man. Breaking news up in Chicago, up in Hallis Hall, as the Chicago Bears, my Chicago Bears, have landed a coach, man. Landed a coach. And Adam Schefter just came out with the breaking news that the Bears was going to hire Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. And I had to bring a special guest falling through. Salim, Mr. Taylor Street from Weekly's Dog Sports Betting Podcast. You can check them boys out on YouTube, Firebox 2300. You know what it do. And man, bro, I appreciate the fall through and the check-in, man. What's happening, brother?
Hey, what's happening, brother? I just want to say happy Martin Luther King's Day, first and foremost, That's a legend, so I had to go ahead and get him a shout out. But man, it's a good day. It's cold out here in Chicago. It's 0 degrees. But hey, I'm in that house tucked in. Just happy to hear all these good news that's been transpiring. You feel me?
Oh man, all day, man. And I guess it's a cold day in Chicago. It's cold across the whole U.S. And I guess it's a perfect day to get a coach. The Detroit Lions, they fell on the sword, in their divisional round loss to the Washington Commanders. That opened up the door for Ben Johnson to talk to teams. And the ironic thing about, what I'm hearing is that, obviously the Lions was in the playoff race. And Ben Johnson, he never stepped foot in Hallis Hall before accepting the job. I'm ecstatic. I think it's a big-time move for the Bears. But I'm going to pass the baton over to you, man, because this was your guy, man. And just tell me how you feel, man, about the Bears, man, with the new head coach and Ben Johnson, man.
I mean, I feel ecstatic right now. It's one of those things that came true. This was one of the top guys on my personal board last week when I came over here. I was mentioning, that's the guy I wanted. Not because he's a wonderful offensive coordinator. That's the first thing, but just to take a vital piece off of the Detroit Lions. He was a high-end offensive coordinator this year, and now they don't have him anymore. So it's like killing two birds with one stone. That's the main reason why I wanted him, as far as our head coach, just to eliminate with Detroit, that chemistry that Detroit was doing. So now I feel like that's gonna put them in a situation where they kind of have to start over and have new concepts. To where, that can mess up their chemistry that they had, over the last couple of years. So man, I'm excited about seeing what he can do with Caleb Williams and seeing what he can do with this offense. You know, I mean, it's not over and done with yet. You know, we still got to get the pieces to the puzzle as far as the personnel is concerned on the field. But I mean, it's just a good start that the Bears jumped right off right away and didn't waste no time, you know, to go ahead and get this guy hired before, you know, he started to go look over here with the Raiders and Jacksonville's of the world, Saints. So, I mean, let's go ahead. Kudos to Ryan Poles for just getting it done, getting it locked down. Now it's about who gonna be our offensive coordinator, what he got in store, you know. So I'm excited to see what's gonna happen now.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the key component of it is Caleb Williams. And, you know, we had this conversation before, you know, and, you know, you obviously had Ben Johnson as your number one guy. You know, I had Vrabel 1, Johnson 2. You know, Vrabel, you know, accepted the job in New England. So, you know, Johnson was the guy that came up on my board just in regards. And I think that for me, it's perfect timing for him leaving out of Detroit. You know, they flamed out. You had Jared Goff probably playing his worst football game as a Detroit Lion, you know, a couple of days ago. And so it's just a situation for us. As you mentioned, the NFC North is very competitive. We get an opportunity to take, you know, one of their biggest guys, you know, biggest guys in their building away from their building and into our building. And so it's just going to all boil down to, especially just with the offensive coordinator, you know, he's probably going to be calling plays, but, you know, he's going to probably bring in a coordinator guy. And then, too, on the defensive end, word on the street is what I'm hearing is that the Bears and Johnson may be interested in bringing my man Dennis Allen, formerly actually of the New Orleans Saints. He got fired as the head coach, but he's a pretty good defensive guy. Saints had a pretty decent defense this season. He may come in as a defensive coordinator. But overall, man, I just think that is a big news, say, for us. And what do you think, though, about, you know, there's been a whole lot of talk about just the void of leadership in the locker room with the Chicago Bears. You know, we've had a couple goofy situations happen during the season. Do you believe that Ben Johnson can kind of be what they call a leader of men for the Bears?
I mean, you know, it's a time will tell. But what I will say, I mean, you know, what Ryan Poles has done this year alone, I mean, they can't say that this was a failure. This situation is a failure, that it's his fault, because let's just be honest, Ben Johnson was on everybody's number one on the board list. So this is what everybody wanted, and so we can't scrutinize the situation if you know, it doesn't pan out. But what I will say, I mean, just based on what he has done and the leadership that he has came from, I think he could take those attributes and bring that to Chicago. Just, you know, being under the Detroit Lions, you know, regime, I think that he did learn a lot of fundamentals from there, and it's good to just see him come here, and let's just see how it happens. I mean, this is his first time coaching, so obviously, it's going to be some scrutiny anytime something happens to where, like, they don't understand, you know, if he don't do, or we lose games that we don't supposed to lose. But I mean, I'm just excited to start his growth, to start his new legacy as far as the head coaching is concerned, along with Caleb Williams. It's his second year, so it's a good thing that they can, like, build with each other for the next 10 or 15 years, you know?
Yeah, and I think that for Ryan Poles, I think he's key in this, because there's been a lot of talk and a lot of murmurs up in Chicago. You know just as well as I do with the great coverage that you guys do over there on your podcast, is that, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, kind of switch gears on Ryan Poles. And if you put it in perspective, this is really his first head coach hire. You know, Eberflus was hired literally 48 hours before he got the GM job. So it's his first crack at it. You know, the Bears brought in a whole slew of candidates, which to me was a little bit confusing. You bringing in 17 guys. You know, that's like the biggest smoke screen. That's the biggest smoke screen ever, you know, just in regards. But I think that for me, you know, I was leaning more so towards what you consider a experienced head coach, just simply based on the fact of just the Bears, the history with Eberflus, and, you know, just going back with Nagy. You know, it's been a long time, actually, since John Fox with the Bears has hired a guy that had been a head coach, say, before. But I think at the end of the day, it's some key that you mentioned, in that, you know, Johnson was high on the board on a lot of organizations and a lot of teams. You know, he was the hottest head coaching candidate out there. So I thought that the Bears, you know, also, too, to something that, you know, I'll get your opinion on, is just the phone call that they made to the Pittsburgh Steelers with Mike Tomlin. To me, that let me know that, hey, look, we willing to pay a pretty coin for a head ball coach. And the sky's the limit for the Chicago Bears. It's not a void of talent. It's probably our most talented ball club we've had probably in the last, say, 5 years. Outside of the offensive line, a few little holes on the defensive line as well. But other than that, the skill position players, it's trending upward, man. And so I know everybody in Chicago, across the National Football League, definitely took notice with this hire just in regards to the Chicago Bears, man. And man, what do you think just overall, just as far as just the dichotomy of the club? Meaning that as far as what you saw this season, the holes that we need to fill. Just what's your thoughts on that, man?
I mean, I feel like, this being Caleb's first year, we had to first go out there and get offensive weapons around him. Based on they knew that he was going to be a starter. And we needed more weapons just to make him feel more comfortable. Now, you can't get everything in the first year, but we do have, and it was offensive line, defensive line, fell backwards. I feel like the defensive line played well the first 4 to 5 games before, and also in the preseason, before we started to gather up some injuries. And the offensive line wasn't that bad, but overall, like after a while, it's a lot of injuries kind of put us in a crazy situation. What I will say is that we got $81 million in cap space, so this is a good time for us to fix these issues and just stay focused on the issues that need to be fixed. Like focus, do it whether it's the draft, free agent. We understand that we need defensive alignment, offensive alignment. Let's just get let's look for these Pro Bowl players, these free agents that's been productive, whether they're on a good team or a bad team. I'm not really an expert with the offensive line, but I do know that they got all that all the
cap space
analytics about these offensive linemen that do things as far as like they haven't had a sack, they haven't giving up a sack in the last 15 games and things like that. They could be on weak teams, but let's find those junkyard offensive linemen that's crazy. Let's get some backup. Let's bulk on that. And defensive linemen also. So I mean that's just my take on that. We got a lot of money though. And last year, this year. We starting off right with the best prospect coach out here. I don't think, last time I checked, I don't believe Chicago ever been in a situation where we got the number one prospect, as far as head coaching that's available. And the year before, we had the number one quarterback. So, sky's the limit right now. That's how I'm looking at it. And, I'm just excited about this future, my man. I'm so excited. Go Bears, the Bears.
Oh, yeah, man. So, yeah, the arrow is definitely pointing high. I think that just the whole organization from McCaskey down to Kevin Warren, I just think that, for us, the arrow is pointing upward at this point for the Chicago Bears, man. And, man, once again, man, I definitely appreciate your insights on our Chicago Bears, bear down, the whole business. Definitely, I appreciate the fall through. Once again, you can definitely check E out on Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast on YouTube, on Spreaker, on YouTube, Firebox 2300. Him and my man Mako always putting it down, no doubt. Coming up, the rest of the show, we on Fire Sports Podcast. The spot.